Hi, how's it going? My name is Zach Diamond, and the book I chose to do this report on is called Weapons of Math Destruction: How Big Data Increases Inequality and Threatens Democracy. It's written by Cathy O'Neil, and she talks a lot about how big data manipulates our lives and the unfairness of the algorithmic systems that are put in place um, just because of how much control they have over everyone's lives. So the big question here lies quite literally within the title of the book, um, just how big data increases inequality. And there are a lot of negative aspects to this. I mean, that's the whole point of this writing. But there are some positive, and I wrote about that in my article because I like seeing things from both sides. But the main point of focus should be on the negatives. So with that, we'll jump into the first example and sort of my thoughts on that. So there was a point in time in Washington where schools weren't giving kids the educations that they really needed. Um, so in an attempt to fix that, there's this algorithmic system put in place where these teachers would have to take this test. There were a lot of variables that went into it too. Um, and the teachers in the lowest 2% of the scoring on that test were essentially just fired from their jobs, which in theory sounds great. Like, hey, we're getting rid of all the bad teachers. Um, but there were multiple situations, one in specific, where a school teacher who got fired due to the scoring system didn't think she was supposed to get fired at all. She had great reviews from kids and parents, and like she was well loved throughout the community, and she just performed poorly in I believe it was a mathematics section, which she just isn't good at, but that was more heavily weighted in the system. So because she didn't do well in one aspect of this test, she was fired from doing what she loved to do. So and when she tried digging to find out, like why did I receive these scores? Why did I get fired? People just kept telling her it's complicated. You won't understand, and that's not really fair to have people take this test that can't even be explained to them. Um, so a lot of teachers started figuring this out, and they started giving students higher grades because one of the variables that went into it was how students' grades are. So they just started changing students' grades, which totally backfired on the whole thing because then kids thought they were doing well and they weren't. Um, so the only reason this went on is because it worked well enough for a while to keep functioning and it made a lot of money. Um, but people's careers and children's education shouldn't be collateral damage due to outliers in someone's system that we're using. So this sort of rolls into the employment process, sort of talking about jobs. So credit score is a big thing that employers look at, and so that's just a monetary value that employers are like, yes, you're a good person, or no, you're not a good person that we want for this job. So credit score is based off a lot of variables. Anyone can have any setback at any time for any reason, and it can be a super unfortunate circumstance. But the credit score might drop at one point in time. An employer might look at that and not hire someone just because of that. And that obviously isn't fair to the person trying to get the job, but it's also difficult for the employer because they could be missing out on the greatest employee of their lives. They could be the greatest person, greatest worker ever, and they just wouldn't know because they're just looking at monetary values. And that sort of relates into just it's difficult for anyone who starts off life poor or as a minority or just anyone who's underprivileged. Those people in a world of the weapons of math destruction, it's just becoming more dangerous for them and expensive. And we talk about equality and equal opportunity, but how can anyone stand by that statement when we use these sorts of systems and incorporate these algorithms that aren't personal interactions or observations? So those are the two big examples I wanted to hit. Just some personal thoughts I had on this stuff is um, I'm very conflicted on this because I'm a huge fan of saying like statistics are statistics, they don't lie. But that's me coming from a privileged background, and I now am thinking, whenever one of these unfortunate things happens to me, that's when I'm going to fall onto that low end of the system, and I'll feel differently. Um, and I know these systems are put into use for a reason, and one would argue it's just to raise money, but they're definitely put into place to create an efficient statistical environment. So overall, I understand both sides, and I struggle leaning towards one side or another. and it's even harder to think about because I feel like I'm good at putting myself in other people's shoes. But what I've definitely learned is that big data 100% has, in some way, shape, or form, increased inequality. So with that, I hope you enjoyed, and I'd like to discuss this further.